says if you want to just jump in and ask a question, you could post it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and just jump right in so that we can make this as interactive as possible. Dr. Pandey, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so interested in hearing your insights. I want to congratulate you on your 50th anniversary, and I want to thank you for inviting me. I can't see the chat, Monica, so if you don't mind, in between as people are, I like to interact like all of you, so feel free to jump in, share insights. This is a dialogue. We're all here to learn from each other. And so I'm very open to the idea. I would like you to please jump in whenever you feel like, put something in the chat, and then Monica will let me know, and then we'll have an interaction, because I can't see the chat. I'm really sorry about that. I just want to start. Can you see my slide? You can see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I just wanted to open by sharing that this is a photo of an outdoor ESL class we held this summer. Thanks to this nonprofit that I volunteer for, the Unforgotten, and a small grant we got from Amazon. So we were able to hold this outdoor class. We started it in June, and we actually just ended it last week. And it was for families in the third largest, Howard County, Maryland is where I reside, and it is actually the third richest county in the country. But it also has one of the largest undocumented populations in the country. And it also has the largest number of Korean families in the country, about 9,000. So this area where we held this class outdoors is an apartment complex, the oldest in the county. And this is just a scene from there. It is a cross-age, cross-linguistic program with mostly Spanish, English, Quechua, an indigenous language spoken in Guatemala. And so a lot of the students could speak and would speak the language, and many of the parents spoke Quechua. The picture on the top reminds me of my childhood in Africa. I have to say, I was introduced to the alphabet song, A is for apple, but I never tried an apple until I was 6 years old. And that's because there were no apples in Africa other than in South Africa. And we lived right next to South Africa in Zambia, but we couldn't import anything from South Africa because of apartheid. And so the first time I saw an apple was when we traveled to India. And in Africa, we would give our teachers impundus, which are fruits that taste like apple, a mixture of apples, sapote, a fruit in Central America, which with a version in India as well. And also it has a taste of like cantaloupe, a mixture of all three, and passion fruit. I understand in China, they give their teachers oranges as a symbol of education. And interestingly, in Puerto Rico, they call the orange or the tangerine, they call it, I believe they call it la naranja, but they also la china. That's because the Chinese used to import the oranges from China. And I know New York City has a lot of residents, a lot of Puerto Rican students. And so I just thought I'd mention that, how culturally different this is. Also, reading and writing, these children are holding books. And I know, Monica, you teach elementary school, and perhaps there are teachers here who teach preschool and elementary kids as well. We know that in many countries, reading and writing is not taught till age 7. Finland is an example. But in the US, we tend to push writing very quickly. And as linguists and as language educators, we know that unless the student is fluent in speech, it's really tricky and hard to get them to be fluent in writing. And with the internet, where the vast majority of communication is happening through email and written communication, this is particularly problematic for ESL students, because the idea or the understanding is that they are supposedly fluent, that they have to be literate in the language. Here's another scene from our outdoor academy. There's a baby here, 8-month-old Daniel, who would join us from time to time. And he kind of continues to inspire me when I look at this picture. So I want to start, of course, by acknowledging all of you as educators and heroes. You are really to be commended for your hard work. You do so much. I know that you're overburdened, and I want to congratulate you. Monica, thank you for reaching out. My colleague Cynthia Chastain from Missouri is here. She and I researched and co-wrote this paper that we're going to talk about today, the study. And I have a student called, last semester, Abdul Kiawen, who created all the SoundCloud clips. He put them on SoundCloud, the interviews with the students and the parents. So I want to thank him for that. And also Supreet Anand, the interim director of OELA, she helped review my paper, our paper, and also she gave us some suggestions to share today. And then the Unforgotten and Amazon. We're going to start with some challenges, and I would like to hear challenges that you are encountering currently. I also want to remind us that OELA is emphasizing the extension of flexibilities. In other words, we should not be stressed out, because at this time, we can use our own school-based assessments, and we have a lot of flexibility, a lot more than we might imagine. I'll also introduce us briefly to language building blocks, or the individual building blocks of language that most of us as language educators are using, but just want to give us a sort of a microscopic look at this, and then we'll go into the study. So, oh my goodness, I think my screen just froze. It looks like it did. So, okay, challenges. So I'd like to ask you to please share via chat 1 or 2 challenges that you're currently facing, and to consider whether these challenges are different from the ones that you faced in the spring. So if you could just quickly type 1 or 2 challenges and share with us, we'd be most grateful. And you could number your responses so we know whether or not. So you could just type for 2, you could say same, different, so we know whether or not the situation is any different from the spring. Do we have the same kinds of challenges that we had in April when this whole, when we switched to virtual instruction? And of course, just a reminder that we're not alone, nor are our students, and that self-reflection really helps. So I'm going to, in fact, do you mind sharing this link on Flipgrid? If you are, it's a little self-reflection that I wanted to share with as a little 1-minute video that one of my former students who now teaches in Las Vegas created for teachers to share the importance of self-reflection. So here you'll see one teacher sharing his self-reflection. Oh, we don't have to look at it. I'll share the slides. You can just look at them at the link at your own convenience. So the participant link is at the bottom. Hopefully you'll go to it and record a 1 minute or even less than 1 minute, however long you want it to be. But Flipgrid only allows us to speak for about a minute and a few seconds. So if you would like to, and I hope you will, just share your thoughts on self-reflection, I would be very, very grateful. And then we can maintain like a growing list of self-reflection of teachers around the country, ESL teachers. I also find that recording myself on my phone every day on my recording app really helps me think out loud and plan and think about what I should be doing differently, which student I should be, focusing on specifically for that day, or which 2 students need help in a certain area. Just a reminder. And when I sort of talk to myself or talk in my phone, I find that it helps me plan ahead. I don't know, just hearing it helps me. So let's go to the chat. Monica, would you like to share some of these challenges, please?
Sure. Differentiation is something that has come up a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Also, students are struggling with both the language, and technology continues to be a big one. Also, I think teachers, someone mentioned students are mentally exhausted, and I want to add in teachers as well, mentally and emotionally exhausted. Distributing authentic materials. It's tricky that we can't actually just hand a student a book. And, I know at the elementary level, it's sometimes not ideal to, be teaching children to read via a screen when you would normally sit next to them. Also, engagement continues to be a problem. Addressing student needs when there are so many needs. We're trying to put band-aids on the slew of needs that our families have every day. And sometimes that's needs including food needs, connectivity needs, and health needs at this point when families are sick and and struggling. Difficult time even with the login, students still struggling with the login. Job loss, families are struggling financially right now, survival of those families. When so many serious issues are happening, school kind of sometimes is on the back burner because there are pressing issues that families are struggling with. So those are a bunch of the issues.
Thank you for sharing them. I appreciate you sharing those needs, and so I'm trying to think. This is so true. These have been raised time and time again. Of course, the technology issues and authentic materials. Very important point. How do we customize? Because every student has specific needs, and how do we find materials that will help each student with specific needs? Because most of us, so can you do me a favor? Can you put in the chat how many ESL students you're serving? So that way we can have a sense of, imagine planning for this many students, and how can we come up with with relevant materials that can help these students? One way that I'm thinking of might be to categorize their needs and create like a sort of a growing list of resources on the internet that could have, that could be assigned, because there's so many YouTube videos that I'm finding that my students find to be quite useful. I've been quite surprised at how many resources exist that I wasn't aware of until the crisis struck. A lot of YouTube videos that a lot of teachers have created, a lot of literally, resources I didn't know. There's a wealth of information. Just sort of categorizing them is the big problem. So I just wanted to share and I want to thank you for sharing your challenges, and we'll return to them in the middle and towards the end of the presentation. I just wanted to share with you, my students are, these are monolingual English-speaking American students, and they too are experiencing, unhappiness and difficulty. So just yesterday, I gave them time to vent. So I give them about 5 minutes to vent at the end of every class. I say, I'm not listening. Yesterday, I said I would like their permission to share the chat, but I didn't record the verbal exchange, although my daughter overheard some of it, and she said the tone was quite caustic, and it was fine, And a student wrote me an email saying, I hope you didn't take offense to the tone. And I wrote back to her, I said, I want you to feel free to talk and, share your problems or, challenges, issues that you're having. Don't worry about that part. But as you can see, self-motivation is a problem with, according to one student. One student even said, not gonna lie, death doesn't seem too bad. Imagine a student saying that. That means they're so, literally, that they're so unhappy with this virtual instruction thing. These are freshmen, so they didn't expect the college experience to start with this kind of virtual thing. So imagine how ESL students must be feeling when they have the additional language barriers. So I just want to remind us of the key ingredients for language acquisition. Number one, being comprehensible input, which is on the left side of the screen. Plus, of course, motivation, which we can help, encourage students and get the parents to encourage the students, get siblings. But we have to get our students to stay motivated and find ways to ensure that they're motivated. And we also have to make sure that that everything we assign requires them to hear and understand language throughout the day. Then we have to give them opportunities to interact, to make sense of meaning through collaboration or play. And third, we have to make sure that they get and that they incorporate feedback. And the biggest challenge with the virtual instruction is that while we're able to give them materials, and not all of them, as we know, are authentic or necessarily customized or relevant or useful to the students. That's part of the challenge. Step two is really missing the interaction part. A lot of the students tell me that when they're in the ESOL class, which is typically 45 minutes long, there is, the classes may, on average, they last, at least in Maryland, in Howard County, on average 35 minutes. And sometimes the classes end quicker because students are not talking. But they've shared with me, and even if there's 7 or 8 students, attendance is a problem. There is very minimal interaction between the students during these classes. So we've got to think of ways to increase that interaction. And outside of Zoom and Google Meets, how can we enable that component to be present outside of the regular classroom? And third, making sure that they're getting timely feedback and incorporating that. So this is the big challenge with the online instruction. So this is sort of a yin-yangized version of this. Comprehensible input represented by the CI, talking, texting, visual language representing the interactivity, and then the feedback. I just want to quickly visit the language building blocks aspect. All of us are teachers, and we know that sounds are the smallest unit of language, but sounds can really confound our students. So when, for example, we spell girls with an S, but we pronounce it with a Z, and if we don't draw attention to that sound, or how the plural S makes 3 sounds, S, Z, and uz, or the ED past tense, the regular past tense, it could be ta, da, or ud. Drawing attention to these differences is critical to their success as ESL students, and helping them come up with a formula as to which sounds, what is going to be the likely sound of that ending based on the sound that precedes it, but having them come up with that, or making them realize that, or based on their memory of that word, or the rules that they've imbibed somehow, is very important. Morphemes is just a fancy word for the meaning units of language. So girl is single meaning unit, girls is 2, so the S signifies plurality, so it's a unit of meaning. So there are 2 morphemes in girls. Would you put in the chat how many morphemes or meaning units there are in went? So think about meaning as units. So for example, go is 1 unit. So how many units would went be in terms of meaning? If you said 2, that would be correct, because went is equal to go plus pastness, the meaning of it is over. And this is where instructing students on how to decode meaning is critical. So went is equal to go plus it's over. And making that clear to students can sometimes mathematically help a lot of students. As Monica, you mentioned, one size doesn't fit all. What I've discovered with a lot of my special needs students, mathematically breaking down the words that have, for example, apostrophes like can't is equal to cannot minus the 0, replaced with the apostrophe, really makes more sense than if I just say can't is equal to, the negative form of can. So if I actually draw it out for them, it makes more sense. The other thing is words. Words and idioms are the same. Idioms are the hallmark of American English. I would encourage each of you to just record yourself while you're teaching and go back to your recording and think about and count how many idioms you used in that class period. If you have used over 3, I guarantee you, you will likely have used more than 3, then that in itself is an opportunity for you to pause and think, are idioms easy for our students to understand? Because the reason they're categorized as words is because we have one word substitutes for them. For example, my attention was drawn to the difficulty of idioms by a man at a conference in India, the All India Institute of Linguistics, and he was attending from Bangladesh. And he said to me, "Excuse me, English is very confusing language. How is it technically possible to sit down and sit up at the same time? And I said, you got me. And he looked at me and I realized I used an idiom to respond to his question about an idiom. And he was right. How can you technically sit up and sit down at the same time? It is so confusing. And so idioms are really confusing to our ESL students and also to special needs students in general. We need to, so I would say avoiding idioms or actually breaking down idioms or maybe introducing an idiom of the day might be one way to go. The next larger unit, we're moving in terms of sizes, phrases. So phrases go to clauses and clauses to sentences in terms of size. And then finally, discourse. This is something I want to draw attention to because oftentimes this is not drawn attention to in language books. Although with, for example, some of the standards, like for example, it's in Milwaukee. What is that agency that has created these standards? I'm having a senior moment, but it'll come to me. But a lot of states are following the standards for that particular University of Wisconsin.
WIDA.
Thank you. WIDA. So WIDA mentions, thank you, WIDA. So WIDA mentions discourse because WIDA standards were created by linguists. And so discourse is mentioned, but a lot of teachers are still puzzled about what discourse means. Really, discourse is anything longer than a sentence. It could be a paragraph. It could be a painting. It could be anything meaningful, anything that is a function. So for example, every language or every dialect of English can have distinct speech acts or writing acts or functions of language. They're not the same. They're not universal. I'll give you a quick example. When we were living in Nigeria, we had something called communal complimenting. So if you saw somebody doing their laundry or washing their car, you had to say, well done. If you didn't say well done, you would be rude. And there was a local expression in Yoruba, ekweleo, which meant well done. And people would smile back. And so this was kind of like common. You would say, well done, well done. You will acknowledge people working. And it's a way to motivate the community. That's a function of language in Nigeria. It's not a function of language in America. The same thing with requests. Some of the requests are not, for example, universal. So the functions of language do vary, and the way the language is organized. So for example, if you want to request money back from somebody in Nigeria, there are 3 ways to do it. Either you say to them that your daughter or son is coming to study in America, which is a clue that they need to send the daughter or son away with some extra cash. And this is the time they will return the money. Or you indirectly hint at the money. You never ask for it directly. You might even spend an entire hour hosting them before you ask for your money very indirectly, like, oh, I almost forgot. I need to go to the bank, or I need to get some money. And then they'll remember, hopefully, that they owe you money. It's very indirect. And the third way is you could potentially steal something temporarily of theirs. And when they notice it gone, they'll know that they owe somebody money. It's very interesting. Here's an example of discourse. This is a 5-year-old's note to the tooth fairy. It says, can I please have 2 bags of candy with any kind of candy? Can I also have 20 candies, please? This is an afterthought, the please. Thank you for reading this letter. Your friend Sahara, P.S. If you can't get any candy, you can always get a bunk bed or anything else. Now, her big sister helped her construct this letter. She was 5 when she wrote this. And she is referencing the Indian concept of sankoch, which is the hesitation to impose on somebody. And how is this realized? It's realized through indirectness. A lot of our ESL students come from cultures where they do not think it's polite to impose on their teachers by asking too many questions. There's such a thing as too many questions. Even when they sit in our classrooms, if we have open seating, you'll notice they'll usually sit in the back, because sitting in the front is a sign that you want to be first and you consider yourself to be better than others. But open seating is rarely the case in US schools. In the chat, I would be curious to know if any teachers during face-to-face teaching had open seating in their classrooms. Just something to think about. But when I asked this child, why did she write this letter and what did she really want from the tooth fairy? She said she really wanted a bunk bed. So I asked her, why didn't you ask for the bunk bed? And she said, well, it would be rude to ask for something as expensive and as big as a bunk bed. It would be easier to ask for candy. And that's why she didn't put the real request until the end. This example of indirectness and the function of language, namely to request something, is exemplary of cultural differences in language structure. This is an example of discourse. This is an expression that you see all over India, do not spit. Does it really mean you shouldn't spit? No, it's referring to pan, which is betel nut, which looks like bloodied marks on the pavements of India, and that's what they mean in Indian English. So this is an example of discourse. You know, the function of not spitting, this kind of environmentally problematic food, which is a digestive, and also some people put tobacco in it, but this is an example of discourse. And I think here's an example from a comic strip in Indian English. Here, they're talking about a sacred thread ceremony. This is a function of language. Students at age 10 have sacred thread ceremonies, but they don't make sense in American English. So this would be an example of discourse. The function of language would be different. So I have used this language building blocks framework to chart differences in politeness across cultures. So on the left side of the screen, you could have negative language and increasingly polite language to the right. So for example, in American English, when you say nah or shush, it's not as polite as if you were to say shh, or moving to the right side on the top where sounds are, just saying quiet please, or listen up, or just being silent. That would be considered more polite. Moving from na to or ah, which is more polite. The same thing with words and phrases. Livid is not as polite as angry or upset. Impossible is not as polite as, say, challenging. Not available is not as polite as unavailable. So when you say, I cannot get to the phone, saying I'm unable to get to the phone downplays the negativity. Same thing with sentences. Conditionals are threatening. Unless you pay by Friday, you can use statements. Please pay by Friday to avoid eviction. So we see this decline of positivity and making students aware of the functions of language and how your politeness does change depending on whether you're using statements, whether you're using questions, is something that is quite important and part of the cultural development of a student. The same thing with discourse, the organization of your language and the functions. So for example, in the American business sector, we tend to buffer things. So when we give bad news, even if we're declined for a credit card, we still thank the customer, and then we go to give them a silver lining. Please apply again in 6 months, because we know that credit card companies love when we apply and when we go into debt. So this is an example of how we can use language building blocks, even in the largest setting, to be aware of our own interactions. I have even used it to think about cultural differences in language. So the NV here stands for nonverbal communication. Before I came to the United States, I had no concept of the term inside versus outside voice. The only terms we used was your normal voice and whisper. So when I first walked into a public library in Chicago, where I went to did my first master's, and I saw, please use your inside voice, I was puzzled by what that meant. I thought, was that the voice inside my head? What is that they're talking about? Now, and I teach at a historically Black college, so the biggest complaint among the students, and reason why most of them come to the university, and we're now in our 154th year, is that they want to have a minority, an African-American experience. And they say that wherever they've gone to school, 90% of them have been told to be too loud and stereotyped as being loud. And I say, wouldn't it be nice to have like little signs, proud to be loud? Because in minority cultures, increasingly you see interactivity is not frowned upon. I have a student from Norway who told me recently that her stereotype, because we were talking about biases yesterday, that in Norway, you cannot have your conversations heard outside of your homes. That if you're in a public space, you should never have your conversations be heard. And this is typical also of mainstream America, but a lot of our students are not accustomed to that. So we find that sounds could be culturally significant. If you're from Greek culture, we know that ftuf tuf tu is how, for example, in the biblical terms, the spitting of the serpent would refer to protection from the evil eye. And so these sounds are culturally significant. In Nigeria, if you add O to anything, it makes it more polite. So for example, we have Nathaniel, we have Carmen, and Sophia. If I just say Sophia O, or Nathaniel O, it would be more polite in Nigerian English and all local languages by adding that O sound at the end to make it more polite. So a lot of our students inadvertently bring in these extra sounds. If we pay attention to that, these are the cultural differences that they're bringing into the language. The same thing with Indian languages. There's an honorific called, it sounds like G, which you tag on to people's names. So you'll be like Carmen G, Sophia G, Denise G, Monica G, which would mean respectfully. And we see a lot of the students, they inadvertently transfer. So they say teacher as opposed to, and that's because in Spanish, for example, they say maestra, maestro as a form of address. And a lot of Saudi students, they address us as teacher because they're thinking in their home languages, and they're not trying to be rude, but they're just transferring these concepts. So I just wanted to draw attention to these things. And lastly, cultural specific language functions. Another example would be complimenting as a different function. So in Nigeria, you compliment a man on his daughters. This is a very common function. I remember the day that my 16-year-old sister opened the door, because the phone lines didn't work all the time in Nigeria. And so people would just knock on the door. And if they knew if we looked like we were dressed, they would say, oh, I won't bother you right now. I'll come back another time. And we, my parents would say, oh, no, just come in. Let's have some chai or, have some tea, typical African and Indian hospitality. But I noticed when she opened the door, the man at the door was, he worked in my dad's department, in the geography department at the college. And he immediately said to my sister, my wife. And my father flew out of the room and started getting angry. He said, she's only 16. How could she possibly be your wife? And he said, no, sir, we don't mean any offense. We simply, in our culture, we simply mean that this is a compliment. It has nothing to do with anything like that. So of course, we had to understand that it was a function of complimenting. So now I'm going to use this to just mention that in the study that Dr. Cynthia Chastain and I did in the spring to assess the extent to which U.S. schools in three areas, namely Maryland, Las Vegas, Nevada, and Missouri, were catering to ESL students and parents and educators like you, but in those specific states. We also looked at communication on the websites and email, and we looked at these language building blocks, to what extent they mentioned families. How often did they use parents and emphasize parents as a way to empower parents and make it clear that the target audience on the web page was the parent? If they had a parent portal, the terminology parent portal would signal that parents were considered important. So this is why I wanted to just share that building blocks framework. Here are the research questions we asked. 4 main questions, which you can take a look at and hopefully you can see. So I won't go into all those questions, but you can just read them for yourself. Here are the educator insights and challenges that were shared. Keep in mind, this was in April that we did the study. And so it was right after the crisis, right after schools closed. So the first problem and challenge that teachers identified was attendance, teacher stress and burnout, tech challenges. One teacher said, I know of a student whose computer got there 4 weeks late, and even after it was supposed to get there, they had to go pick it up. So that put them behind by another month. Internet issues, which was also mentioned as a challenge earlier today, were a problem initially at least, and they continue to be a challenge for many families. Then the literacy challenge, we can't do reading and writing effectively. It's just not the same as being there and helping in person, according to one teacher. Communication challenges, according to one teacher, I wish they'd be more honest. She's referring to the students about what's stopping them from attending every ESL and or content class. Another teacher said, we're discouraged from contacting students by phone, at least in Maryland. This is a middle school teacher. The administration told us not to share a number, essentially. So this is a big problem because as ESL teachers, we know that auditory connection is critical to the success of our student. If they're developing an understanding of the language, they have to hear it. And if they're not yet ready to read and write, then how can we not use the telephone or some kind of auditory system to connect? Then family and communication connection is a challenge. Many schools have family liaisons or community liaisons, but in this particular school, she said they are technically the Chinese and Korean liaisons. Neither speak Spanish. So when and if they ever reach out to these students and their families, they have to do so through an interpreter. And that's simply not the same. I'm sorry for the typo. I forgot to type interpreter. There's also the uncertainty challenge that another teacher shared. I think we're going to have to repeat the quarter in the fall, but I don't know. One teacher in Missouri, the program serves 275 ESL students, she shared that she used primarily phone calls, which were very, very much encouraged in Missouri. And Missouri is unlike Maryland. They don't have as many cases of COVID, at least at that time they didn't. The day, in fact, that Cynthia and I presented at a conference, it was in actually March 14th. And right after that weekend was when schools closed almost everywhere in the country. And they only had their first case at that time. But even now, they've actually moved to in-person instruction. If Cynthia's on the call, she can probably speak more to that or share that in the chat. Her objective, she said, was to inform, reassure, and inquire about technology in home. She said there were no specific communication outlets, resources, and/or messages dedicated to ELLs in their state. She recommended talking points as far as challenges. She shared that calling students on three-way calls to leave a message with an interpreter and give them a time to call back with the interpreter was a challenge, so they felt comfortable picking up, getting online learning set up with three-way calls, helping them understand that students should do what they can and not worry about what they can, parents not knowing how to help. These are all challenges, which is a big challenge. How can we help parents help the students? One Maryland-based ESL teacher, she prefers phone calls. She said she was going against the district's recommendation of using phone calls. She said they're so much faster. I don't have to translate content. I have Spanish-speaking students that speak pretty well, but they can't read or write. So at least this way, i.e. through calls and audio messaging, I know they understand what's being shared. My ESL students like the phone calls and messages. Here is one teacher sharing the benefits of WhatsApp. She says she uses it mostly with her fifth graders, but she agrees that the audio is actually more beneficial and it adds a personal touch. Here are the students that we interviewed in the spring. They range in age from 5 to 17. All 4 of the 17-year-olds actually, I would say, systematically dropped out that semester. All of them are currently working. They have shared that they learn more English at Checkers and McDonald's where they work, and they get to use more English than during online instruction. And one of them is in danger of never coming back. She has an 8-month-old sister, and she's shared that it's been very taxing for her because she is solely in charge of, watching her baby sister until she goes to work at 2 o'clock. And she literally has a window of like 15 minutes to walk to her aunt's place after classes end. And now she's taken a double shift, and she's also trying to help her mother pay for the bills. So you can hear all of these interviews on SoundCloud. The link is going to be provided. It's also on the Facebook page. I put the link there, but you'll see These are their thoughts. The first, where on the top it says one, they're responding to their immediate, their sentiments right after school closed, systematically sad. 1 month after school closed, very sad. One was very happy, no homework. This was Brian, 12-year-old. 17-year-old, one was happy because she could sleep in. And one said, I never liked school, so she was happy. So the 17-year-olds were happy 1 month after school closed, and one 12-year-old, but the rest were very sad, or mostly sad. In terms of the content, not enough, not enough. Systematically, they said the content that was presented was not enough. And that was because in Maryland and Missouri and Nevada, they were only offering 45 minutes of classes and at that time in the spring, and it was not enough. It was not, it was not as much as is being offered now in the fall. And they've shared their most challenging classes. This is the link to the SoundCloud interviews. I just want to introduce us to some of these kids now. This is Brian, who's 12, who actually was very happy when school closed. And he was in this picture, you see, he's the one on the right. Now he's 12. It took his mother 5 years to bring him here because she had to send for the coyotes. She had to save $5,000 for each kid. So first she brought the one on the left, and I'll just call him Jose. And now he is 19. He just graduated high school last year. I'm trying to get him to go to college. He's not interested in school. In fact, I have to literally fill out the application for him so that he actually completes it. So we've agreed to meet next week and try to fill out this application. But right now he works with his mom in the food truck that they just acquired. And she sent for him first because he was most likely to join the gangs. And when he first came to America, he was 11 and actually 10 and a half. And, I befriended him because, that's something I love to do is interact with ESL families. And the first piece of art he ever made in school is a jewelry box, which he gave me, and I still have it. And I shared it with him at his graduation. He was tickled that I still have it. But it's amazing how quickly these kids, grow up. This is Brian. He actually joined, he came here 5 years after. But these are some of the challenges the students have identified. Chores, multiple chores. They have to cook, clean, babysit, very minimal parental oversight because the parents are working 7 days a week or 6 days a week to pay for the rent and the internet and the food and all the other, and the car payments and all the other bills. And what I've discovered is that they have to pay a lot more in deposits. Like if they have to hook up electricity, for me, it would be like a deposit of $150. For them, it would be a $300 deposit. For a cell phone, they have to put down a deposit of $200 to $300. So I realize now that their bills are much higher than most of us, because many of them don't have, many of my students at least, or many of the students in Maryland that we serve in our county are undocumented. Insufficient instructional contact hours and relatively non-engaging communication tools. El inglés es mi problema is consistently one of the challenges that was reported. Sometimes I don't know something that I don't know was said by one student, and that is a challenge in itself, not knowing what you don't know. Technology, insufficient instructional contact hours, we mentioned that. Personal touch, the lack of the personal touch. I'm so bored at home, so I want to go back to school, according to 13-year-old Dan. Now he works at Checkers. Peer support and self-motivation share the day. Thank God for, thank heavens for Snapchat. Snapchat is how most of these students are getting a little bit of English or interaction, but look at the kind of English they're getting. It's very abbreviated. Can I call you? You are even more idiot than me. Let's go. Happy birthday. Thank you, bro. Are you going to start the class today or tomorrow? I don't know. Okay, well, this is a 12-year-old's reaction to how life was. And keep in mind, he has been learning English and has been in America, this is Brian, for 5 years now. But look at his writing. And this is a translation in terms of conventional spelling. My life has been good, but when the class is online, it was not good because don't know. And sometimes I don't know something that I don't know, or readings, activities, homework are too hard. Sometimes I give up, but I tell my friend to help me and he helped me. And I feel happy because he helped me. The school have helped me like a 5 out of 10 since online class started, because they don't check anytime if I understand the lessons. He said simply asking, do you understand? Or does anybody have any questions? Put it in the chat or ask is not enough. He said sometimes students are so afraid to ask. Sometimes they don't even know how to phrase the answers. And 2 students said that there are students in their classes who joined recently who don't know how to write in English. So they were texting them in between and telling them how to ask questions of the instructor. So they've become their peer supports. They don't check my speaking. I don't have a lot of class kids to speak English. They're in his school, they haven't assigned, peers who are English speaking to work with the ESL students. So there's complete isolation. There's very little contact with English speaking students outside of the content classes. They meet on Zoom or Google Meets and that's it. They never see these students again. They don't have their phone numbers. They don't have Snapchat contact with them. I don't ask questions in the chat because I are nervous. This is him. This is his favorite pastime. Video gaming. Big brother, 19-year-old. If he's not working in the food truck, it is video gaming that takes his attention. This is how the school is measuring his performance. Make sure you spend 44 minutes on word study. Try to spend 45 minutes a day on grammar. Try to spend 45 minutes a day on comprehension. And we will email you if we see that you didn't spend 45 minutes, then we know we need to send you an email. Same thing with Lexia Power. So here's an example of what he said. He's a 12-year-old, again, Brian. He said, look at this. This makes no sense. Fantastic is a fantastic word because it has a short A or short I and a closed syllable. Most of you are probably wondering, what in the world does that even mean? How is that going to change my life? And this is the kind of material that is very, 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 very common in the internet. A lot of the stuff makes no sense. And speaks to the point that one of our participants, one of our teachers here mentioned the lack of authentic materials. And here's his final reading assignment. Identify words with rising intonation in a sentence using visual markers. Really? How, what use is this if we're not, having him speak out these sentences? Doesn't it make more sense for him to record him speaking out these sentences in, let's say, Flipgrid or in his phone and the recording device, so we can see whether or not he knows which words to emphasize, as opposed to reading it in his mind and not understanding which word really rises in intonation. So this student reported that all students had to do these exercises and shared that some make no sense. Nobody checked their work or checked in to be sure they understood what needed to be done. All that matters is whether or not you put in a lot of time. And going back to the diagram shared at the beginning, we need to be sure that they have that interaction and that feedback. So that's what's missing here. Simply, getting a record, some kind of indication that the student has spent 5 minutes doing this or 10 minutes doesn't mean that they have understood the content. So this is the big challenge, and this is where the dialogue needs to happen. He said sometimes his friends or his mother's friends helped him and his sister complete their assignments, but to what extent is this their work? And just completing an assignment, and does that really mean that they're learning? How much? So this is what we need to start thinking about. Are our assignments giving them an opportunity to make sense of what it is that they're exposed to in terms of spoken? Is there some spoken language we're giving them to hear in the assignments? Is there something they can hear and not just see? Because writing is a secondary skill. It's a human creation. It's not really language. It's a memory of language. So are we giving them an opportunity to hear enough of the language? Are we giving them an opportunity to interact in it with a sibling or with somebody or with a classmate or a peer, assigning that as an assignment? And is the assignment requiring them to get almost immediate feedback within a day or almost immediately? How can we ensure that? And so I asked them, what happens if you don't, put in the 20 minutes? He said they'll just and he uses they, which is very distancing, they send you an email. Here are audio chats that I used with one of the special needs students. When I wrote to her, she wouldn't write back. She would say, send me an audio. And so we would go back and forth, and through the audio, we would communicate, and we were able to get her homework done through audio chats. I would say, send me a picture of the assignment. And that's how it was more sensible, made more sense. Here's an example of her assignment. She is 16, and look at the assignment. She's an ESL student. Which is the correct possessive noun? Wouldn't it make more sense to ask the question another way? Put in the chat, what would be a more comprehensible way for an ESL student to answer this question? For the student. I just think that this is just too grammar-centric for an ESL student, or any student for that matter. If we make it clear what the functions of language are, it would be more sensible. So making it more meaningful. The language you use must be meaningful. Monica, would you like to share some of the comments in the chat, please?
Sure. So focusing specifically on this, someone was saying that, when you're writing the lesson, you have to first understand that language is co-constructed in social contexts. So, what meaning are we getting from this? Someone said, who does the blank belong to? Or how can you best complete the sentence? Make it simple.
Thank you. Thank you. This is exactly the point. And also, siblings are distracting. They're teething. There's a lot of chores to be done in the house. For example, food truck, you've got to put all the plates in order. About, she has to do 50 a day. She has to do laundry. She has to do all the cooking. The student who, completely stopped attending class about 2 months after classes started, he said his big challenge was, he got into the iPhone craze, and he said just, having the motivation to log on when you just there's not enough time for interaction in the classes. He said it's terrible. And this is what they send him when he misses class. They say things like, good morning. We missed you this morning in ELA, so-and-so's class. Don't forget to complete your questions. Only reading questions, Act 3, scenes 1 to 5. Do this one. That is the only assignment you must complete. Have a great week. And let me know if you have any questions. Sincerely, he said he doesn't know what in the world this means. Just simply capitalizing stuff. It just doesn't make sense to him. So he just decided to go work at Checkers and learn more English there. And how many of you would agree that simply typing a message and using capitalization is really not getting the point to somebody who's been exposed to English for no more than maybe 2 years or even 1 year, right? So I'm hoping that Google Meets and Zoom will integrate in the chat audio chatting as a feature in one of their updates. Tanya, she has to watch her baby brother. So you can see a lot of the kids have chores. Here are their recommendations. You can skim them. More classes, more frequent meetings, longer class sessions, more ESL small group or pair meetings, preferably longer than 45 minutes, more than once a week. One-on-one meetings with each student, averaging 10 minutes of audio or video interaction to allow for customized, individualized instruction, which each ESL student participant stated would be less intimidating. Of course, this puts an undue burden on teachers because we have so many students. So we've got to figure out how we can reduce our burden while making this happen. So let's think about some of the ways we can do this. But let me briefly mention some of the parents' perspectives. They said, solo inglés y utilizan, tienes que ser bilingual. They need to be bilingual. This comes from Maryland. Como yo no conozco mucho inglés, ellos no le importa los estudiantes ni nosotros. This parent is saying, he feels like the teachers are just not really interested in us because they're not reaching out to us in auditory messaging systems. A lot of these parents are not accustomed to using email. They are more familiar with chats and WhatsApp. So they really, really prefer that. Also contracting, because most of them were essential workers, at least, and still are. And they contracted corona very quickly because they were in small spaces. And that put an undue burden on their homes and families. They also had increased household expenses, with the internet bill averaging $53 in Maryland just for slow speed internet, but the average is 53. If you cross the border into the neighboring county, which is only 3 miles down, internet can come down to $10 a month. But because we're in the third richest county, the internet companies won't reduce the cost. So this is a problem. Not knowing how to proceed, one parent said, formaron un grupo en WhatsApp. So some of these parents, they were reaching out to me on Facebook. In our county, it's so ridiculous that they sent a student technology survey in English, and they said, please complete it in English using the Chinese, Korean, and Spanish language translations. And they say the same thing in Espanol. Por favor, complete. They didn't bother to translate that part. Complete la encuesta sobre tecnología en inglés. How is it possible to complete a survey using your language in English? This just doesn't make any sense. So recommendations and resources. Sorry, go ahead. Yes, Monica.
And Dr. Pandey, I just wanted to let you know it is 5 o'clock, so
Okay,
we're just gonna, I
okay,
know
let's
you've got
wrap
so
up.
much to tell us, but
Thank
I
you.
just want to
Okay.
make you aware of the
Thank you,
time.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
I'm so sorry. Let me just wrap up. So recommendations and or resources. Of course, we're all seeking to empower our students. So how can we do that? One thing I've noticed is that since we've transitioned to virtual, we really need to bilingualize instruction because we're not there face to face. So one way to do that is to encourage code mixing. Here's an example. Here, I'm trying to share here. There was a family that had a farm y tenía muchas cows que daban mucha milk, and they had a crib for a baby, but they not used it. Spider webs grew in it, and the king give the family many glass why they need it. The student has only been exposed to English for a year and a half, but notice how using code mixing helped her to get to where she needs, at least to get her point across. 3 months ago, she could only write in Spanish and speak in Spanish. She's one of our students in the outdoor English class. So this is mis planes para mi vida. So these are her plans for her life. First, learn English, finish her classes with good grades, graduate high school, and then get a job to help her father to pay the rent and a lot more. But just in the difference of 3 months, she has actually learned even, her speech is more fluent in English. And she's one of the students in our outdoor, was in our outdoor classes. But the other thing is, using phonetic spelling. So for example, I'm proud. Notice how I put P-R-A-W-D next to proud to share how it could be pronounced that way, proud. So because sometimes the words are not pronounced the way they're written. I'm proud of, and notice in the margins I've put of, O-V, so they realize it's pronounced of, even though it looks like an of my mom, because, notice I've put because in blue, the way it's pronounced. But I noticed this really helped my students when I put the phonetic spellings. So you can do the same. You can handwrite notes, put the phonetic spellings, and just send them a photo. Text them a photo if you're willing to share your number, or if you're willing to use texting to customize your classes. The other thing is audio-visual journaling. Every phone has the record button, and you can have the students record on it and send you a clip, just a report of what they did for the day in English. That's just hearing them talk, or, thoughts on the homework. And you don't have to listen to it right away, but at least they're forced to do it. And the families can help you make sure that they're speaking in English, at least in their phones. WhatsApp is really helpful for that. Assign buddies. Make sure that the English speaking students are teamed up with the non-English speaking or the low English or middle English. Parents are first responders. Parents need some guidance. Dedicate some parent time, whether it's an hour a day, to dialogue with parents via audio messaging or calls. Parents can help us track the buddy contacts, peer exchanges, because we have to be able to monitor the comprehensible input, the interaction during class via periodic audio messaging or phone exchanges, feedback and the incorporation. So for example, here's an example. I'm trying to think of where is the example. Yeah, the peer interaction. So Jason joined us in August and he was with us for 3 months. He had not started his Spanish class. He was 11 the week he joined us. He started taking Spanish 2 weeks later when schools opened in Maryland. And this is his experience in 3 months he was with us in the outdoor academy working with these ESL students. He said that, and I can't read the top part because the bar is there, but something about my experience with this class was amazing. I learned new words and met new people like Officer Christopher. We always had the students identify their careers. So if they wanted to be a police officer, we called him Officer Christopher. He's our 9-year-old. Doctora Allison, she wants to be a doctor, so we call her Doctora Allison. Senora Lorena, Miss Beatriz, and Mrs. Anita. Sorry if I can't remember your name. I'm not good with names, and sorry if I spelled them wrong. I had tons of fun every class, especially when we did role playing and had little parties, and when I tried new foods too, which they were delicious. So thanks for letting me attend your class. He created a game called Bilingual, where he created, based on all the words and concepts he learned, he put them in Spanish and English. And we could play this game in multiple ways. I can share the game with you and footage, but right now we don't have time. So I'm just going to start wrapping up. I'm going to send you each a free copy of this. This book it has 11 chapters. It goes back to how I taught my mother English in Africa and how that changed my life. For attending today, I would like to share with you this book and get your feedback as well. And of course, just remind us how much we have to learn from our students and families about disciplining, the role of written language. I'll just give you a final example of, for example, disciplining. For breakfast, you can have bananas or la faja in some homes. This is how written language is used in bathrooms to communicate cleaning schedules, which are hard to communicate to people in person because that makes them, it's very face problem. It's not face saving, so they just put it on the, and here one of the attendees, one of the home residents hated the fact that he has to clean, so he tore it and threw it in the trash, and they took it out and put it back on the wall to remind him he has to clean miércoles. This is a great way that writing is used to get a message across. Here's an example of how writing is being used in their homes, but writing is not it's a very distancing thing culturally. Por favor, cobraron, what is it? Something con $20 cada uno para comprar líquidos para limpiar y para comprar bolsas para la basura. Muchas gracias. Everybody, please contribute $20 to the household to buy liquids and garbage bags. Thanks for your collaboration. Washers work fine. We order new mortar. This is an apartment complex maintenance crew. They realized that the home residence was Spanish speaking and they had the sense to leave a bilingual note. La lavadora trabaja bien. Lo vamos a ordenar otro motor. If this guy could do it, why can't we, right? As teachers. This is how these folks text me, and you can see that they're not very fluent in writing, but they're getting their point across. And this is why it's so important to collaborate with our parents. So I want to stop here. I apologize for talking too much. So please ask questions and please stay in touch. I want to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey. And many people in the chat are asking for a follow-up. We'd love to invite you back. There's so much to be discussed on all of these issues this year. And I think, everyone is, wondering what the next few months are going to bring for our families. So thank you for offering some much needed suggestions as to the types of almost like grassroots efforts we have to take as educators. In my own district, there are administrators who say only contact families through this method, and how limiting that can be. And we need to be empowered to use whatever method works to reach those families. We have to have strong communication. We have to find ways to think outside the box to support all of our learners.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions?
If anyone wants to unmute and ask a question, you're more than welcome to. We have a few minutes that you can ask questions if you want to.
And then ideas, additional ideas. If you can put in chat additional ideas, because this is how something might have worked for you, and then we can use it, find that it might work for some of our students. I find that I get amazing ideas when I talk to fellow teachers. So this is so nice for me to get to meet all of you. And I'm sorry that you're not able to talk with as much as I talked today, but hopefully you can share some of your ideas so we can still get the transcript. And yeah.
There was a lot of feedback about WhatsApp, talking points. Someone commented that they had better attendance virtually with conferences this year than they typically do in the building. So looking at some of the positives of, what's going on, that we can learn from that. Like maybe we should not go back to just in-person parent conferences in the future, make virtual an option.
Exactly. I mean, I definitely keep it as an option, because it's more convenient. You don't have to like drive and all of that. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Absolutely.
I'll just say thank you from our from down south. I joined TESOL today because I saw the webinar and wanted to be part of this, and appreciate so much being able to be here. But this was great. One thing we're finding that's working is helping our teachers use really good, authentic, multimodal resources, videos and things that are engaging, to get the kids to get engaged with something authentic, but then scaffold and get them talking about it. So that's what we're trying to do. But again, the planning aspect is just, all our teachers feel like they are just working themselves so hard, and it's just such a struggle to get the kids engaged. So thank you so much. Great ideas. I definitely will view the recording.
Thank you. Could you please do me a favor and share with us what school district and also your email address, please, in the chat? Elizabeth, please.
I'd be absolutely glad to.
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. And thank you, Monica, for opening it up to others as well. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And Dr. Pandey, the presentation, the slides, you will be sharing as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't know if Cynthia is there. Cynthia is an expert in mindfulness. She and I have co-presented in Missouri and at NABE on mindfulness and how we can help students and teachers as well. Cynthia, are you on Zoom? Cynthia?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great, Cynthia. So yeah, do you want to just quickly, and I know that Monica and I had mentioned, getting you perhaps to do a session, but this is something that could help teachers, if you would just want to comment on that.
Well, I'll, as Anita said, I work for the state of Missouri, and we were in a consortium that supported migrant preschoolers. So if any of you, New York wasn't a part of the consortium, but I actually created a webinar and some resources on mindfulness and strategies. So if you do a little research in the Department of Education and do a search for the preschool initiative. But I'm happy to someday share and present a webinar on strategies, kind of breaking down what mindfulness is, how you can do it, the fact that, it can be integrated, not just in your life, but working with your students. So yeah, I'm happy to share on that in a future date.
Thank you, Cynthia. Cynthia and I worked on this study in the spring, and you had mentioned that now there's more in-person, right, in Missouri, at least in-person instruction?
Well, we have some districts because Missouri is very different. We have the northern portions and southern are very rural. So there have been some interesting things going on. I'm in Columbia, so it's a university town, and virtual learning has been on for middle and high school all of this semester. And elementary students shifted to virtual, and they're back. So I don't know what it's gonna bring, but it's different just again, because, and as English learners, I just got an email today from a very, very small school. I don't even know the population of the little town, but they're getting their first 2 English learners ever in January. So I know that in New York, that's quite hard to fathom, but in Missouri, that happens to me. I get lots of emails. And of course you can imagine how challenging that will be for a a school, a district who was never in their in existence worked to support, much less in the middle of a pandemic. So it's always an interesting, as in education, you never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. Absolutely. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Monica, and everybody for attending. And I know you probably want to wrap up, so.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey. We really appreciate you spending time. And like I said, many people in the chat asking for possibly a follow-up. You know, I think there's a lot more to be discussed on all of these issues. And I think you left us with a lot to think about today in terms of how we can better connect with families, how we can better support our English language learners during whatever instructional format, you know, the next few months bring.
Thank you. Thank you again. Keep up the good work, folks, and do share more ideas. You have our email addresses. You have Cynthia's as well. Monica, I sent it to you, so we'll be in touch.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone for joining in this presentation tonight. Have a wonderful night. If you would like CTLE credit for attending, just go to our Nice TESOL website and you will be able to, and I also emailed it to all of the attendees, how to just fill out a very quick form to get your CTLE credit. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Monica, please send me the chat.
I will.
Okay, thank you.